Whoa! Welcome to the What's Already podcast, where we fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Carter. I'm here with my co-host, Alec Burgess.
Let's get it.
We appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead and hit that follow, subscribe, like, bell notification buttons. Keep up with all of our episodes. It helps us grow the podcast, which we appreciate and love. You can also help grow the podcast by telling a friend about us. You can tell a couple of lovebirds, star-crossed lovers about us. We try to keep up with that shit, but most of us are old married guys or old been in a relationship for a long time guys, and so some of that luster we need a movie like this one.
I'm in bed by 9:30. There is no nightlife in my life.
For me, she's in bed by 10 and I'm playing video games by 10:15. Yeah, you know how it goes. But yeah, tell those star-crossed lovers that make everybody kind of dizzy and remember what it was like about us. We're happy to have them as listeners. With that, we are here to talk today about Casablanca. It was released January 23rd, 1943. It was written by Michael Curtiz. It was written by Julius Epstein, Philip Epstein, and Howard Koch. It was directed by Michael Curtiz. It starred Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman, Paul Heinrich, Claude Rains, Conrad Veidt, Sidney Greenstreet, Peter Lorre, and Dooley Wilson. The synopsis: a cynical expatriate American cafe owner struggles to decide whether or not to help his former lover and her fugitive husband escape the Nazis in French Morocco. Don't get mad, YouTube. It was the only time we'll say that word, but it was part of the synopsis. The rest of the time, we'll talk about
National Socialists.
That's right, National
Or is it
Socialist.
Third Reich?
I love this fucking guy. All right. Yeah, look, if you haven't seen this movie, fucking get out.
We don't want you on this podcast.
Jesus,
if you
what a
have
shame.
not seen this movie.
Which is sad.
Case in point, we kicked Matson off.
That's why Matson's not here. It's a fucker. I can't have him shitting on this movie. It'll make me mad, and then we won't be friends anymore. But yeah, look, go watch this movie, no matter what we say, because it's fucking Casablanca. How have you not seen it if you haven't seen it? And if you have seen it, go fucking watch it again. Man, it made a big difference in a lot of things, this movie, and just a lot of things to talk about. So, Alec, I know you wanted to talk right out the gate about casting, and especially Claude Rains and Dooley Wilson. So tell us all about it, my friend.
Okay, this cast, first of all, is Hollywood royalty.
Yeah.
And you have guys who worked together before, namely Humphrey Bogart, Sidney Greenstreet, and Peter Lorre. And they worked in a movie we did do, Maltese Falcon, that Matson shit on. So if you want to go check out that episode, go do it.
Yeah.
But Claude Rains. So I have a hard time saying he's underrated because he was the first actor to make $1 million in a role. However, he's one of those guys who, and we talked about this when we did Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, Paul Newman makes people better.
Yeah.
Claude Rains makes people better. He makes them extraordinarily better. Any movie he is in, he makes great. And he steals the show even when he's there with Humphrey Bogart, who kind of a big deal in 1940s.
Yeah.
So he is phenomenal. And I do not think Casablanca would be as good as it is if he is not the prefect of police, Louis.
For sure.
And then Dooley Wilson. So I did a TikTok about this. Go check out our TikTok, guys.
Oh, really? I'm going to check it out.
Dooley Wilson, what they did. So he plays Sam in Casablanca. He was the most expensive cast member because this was a Warner Brothers movie, I think, and his contract was owned by Paramount Pictures. So Warner Brothers paid thousands of dollars in 1942 for this dude. And he cost the most, but he was paid the least because he's African American. In 1940s Hollywood. Now, before anybody jumps on it, he was still paid a really good wage. It was just the least one, even though he is exceptionally talented because he doesn't know how to play the piano.
Wow.
So he is singing and playing the piano, but if it looks like he's playing the piano, it's because while he's singing, he is watching someone off camera and mimicking their hand movements while singing and playing the piano.
Really?
Really. He's a drummer, or he was a drummer. No clue on how to play the piano. And yet this talented, extremely talented individual is able to sing, act, deliver lines while pretending to play the piano. And all at the same time, he's looking out of the corner of his eye as someone who is playing the piano and copying what they're doing close enough that you can't tell he's not playing the piano.
Wow. I had no idea.
Right? And, I mean, it's so... It's these little things. So Casablanca, in case anybody was wondering, is one of my favorite movies of all time. I know a lot about this movie. And these two guys have always been great for me because they stand out in an all-star cast. And it's not like they stand out a little bit. They steal pretty much every scene that they're in. And it's such the point that Dooley Wilson's version of As Time Goes By is thought to be the original. It's not. It wasn't even written, I think, at the time that the movie takes place, but everybody thinks it's the original. It's the one that, if you think about As Time Goes By, you think of Dooley Wilson scene in it. So these two are so good. And I don't think they get enough credit for it.
Yeah.
Despite, Cloud Rains being paid so much money to play Julius Caesar.
Well, I'll tell you what. Renault is my favorite character in this movie. Just because the guy fucking cracks me up. Like, there's moments in this movie, like when they shut down the bar, and he's like, "How can you shut me down? There's been rumors of gambling in this. Here's your winning."
Oh, thank you very much.
I love, like, his character. Like you said, is my favorite character in this whole movie. And I'm not like, I love good movies, and this one, I think for me. One, I love learning about that with Dooley Wilson. I didn't know that. And I love Cloud Rains because of the Renault character. And I think everybody obviously understands when you say Casablanca, everybody thinks of Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. Mm-hmm. That's just what they think of.
Here's looking at you, kid.
Yeah. But for me, like, one of the things that I talk about before we jump into the fact that this movie is dangerously close to maybe one of the greatest movies ever made, which will be a topic we're going to talk about in a minute. But I think the reason that it has to be considered when we start talking about it is, again, and I talked about this with Sundance or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and that is the cultural impact. There is no way that you can say that this movie is not all over Hollywood, period. There are lines in this that movies still to this day overuse. That I'm like, Jesus, can we find a new? But you can't, because it's so iconic. The Here's Looking at You, Kid. Of all the gin joints and all the world,
and all the cities in the world, she walks into mine.
Yeah. This is the start of a very beautiful friendship. Like, there are lines throughout this movie.
Round up the usual suspects.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, there's a whole fucking movie made on that line. You know what I mean? Like, there is no earthly way to say that this movie has not had a massive impact on Hollywood, period. Because, again, it's just one of those things where there's very few, well, and even like Paris, we'll always have Paris.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I can't even remember what I was watching where the We'll Always Have Paris came up. Oh, it was Ted Lasso. One of the episodes is We'll Never Have Paris because he didn't take his wife to Paris. And then her new boyfriend takes her. So it's like, even in 2023, we have lines from this movie that are titles of an episode because it's that recognizable and it's that popular. So that's, for me, that was the one thing that every time I watch this movie, I forget how many lines and how many parts are still used in popular Hollywood media today. And I'm like, fuck, I always forget how impactful this movie is. So I always laugh. Like, when you say this is one of the greatest movies, is this the greatest movie ever made? I always, my knee jerk reaction is go, really? And then I go, but shit, how do I not at least consider it? Because I don't know that you can say there's another movie that has had as much of an impact on Hollywood.
It'd be rough. I mean, it's to the point where no movie studio will even consider a remake. Because I
Hell
think
no.
Ashton Kutcher tried to get one, and he was shut down by everybody. And Hollywood is a money-making business.
Sure.
Which means a remake of Casablanca would rake in incredible amounts of dough.
Yeah.
And no movie studio will go anywhere close to remaking this film.
Mm-mm.
They won't touch it. And then the other thing, I like to say that this movie is where Hollywood kind of shows that they used to have balls.
Yeah.
Because time frame, right? 1943. You have middle of World War II's going on, which means that this refugee trail that they're forming is actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And they're making a movie about it. Not only are they making a movie about it, they're picking sides. National Socialists are bad.
Yeah.
Refugees are good. And they are fully picking a side. They don't care about how it may look to said National Socialists across the pond or anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
They pick a side. They said this, this, and this. And if anybody says, oh, well, World War II was different, everybody knew that the National Socialists were bad, go fuck yourself. They did not. There was plenty of people who were indifferent, or I'll say kind of like, who cares, right? Type of an attitude. So let's take it out of its bubble, right? And let's move it to 2023. The equivalent of this would be them, Hollywood, making a film talking about Ukraine and Russia and picking a side, which they will never do. The only film that came out that would pick a side is actually a Ukrainian film, which is great because it's in Ukrainian, so you can't really understand what they're saying. But that's the thing, is Hollywood, it's a small budget, kind of almost indie film.
Yeah.
But in 1943 and 1942, because that's when they filmed it, they are picking a side. And they are, this is stuff that's happening at the time that they're making the movie, which most World War II movies or time period movies, war movies, they usually take place 10, 15, 20. Saving Private Ryan was 50 years after the fact. Where they, there's almost this kind of agreement to let some time pass. Casablanca was like, well, hell no. Michael Curtiz was like, fuck you all. I'm going to make a movie. And so for me, that's one of the biggest reasons that this is the greatest movie of all time is, one, studios do not touch it. They won't even entertain the idea. Go try and sell a pitch about remaking Casablanca to movie studios. You'll get laughed out of the room. And two, Hollywood had fucking balls. And they picked a side.
I think what you say about all of that is very on point. And the fact that Hollywood won't even, because I mean, and it's smart, because what would that remake look like? I mean, you literally would just have to repeat the lines, like, and they don't have the impact when you're repeating them. Like, you just can't, because that's like, as I was watching it last night, and I haven't watched it in a long time. Like, it's not a movie that I watch all the time. I've seen it quite a few times, but it's been a while. It's probably been years since I've watched it in its entirety, which I did last night. And I was sitting there watching it going, I cannot, and this goes back to something that we talked about with like Fast X, and like bigger is not always better. Like, this is not, and this has been a time when you couldn't make movies like we make Fast X and the superhero movies. Like, it just wasn't possible because we didn't have the technology, not even remotely. We're lucky to have cameras that fucking filmed the way that, you know what I mean? That's why there's so many editing bloopers in these old movies, right? But it's one of those things where the watching this movie and I go, fuck, this is so good. Even watching it today, I'm like, this is such a good movie. Like, it invokes emotion. It invokes like passion in how you feel it. Like, when you're talking about socialist, nationalist, national socialist, whatever, those assholes, you can't help but go, ooh, you motherfuckers. And then you're sitting there watching, someone like Renault play both sides because he has to, even though deep down he doesn't want to play both sides. He's just as pissed about the occupation as every other French person in the fucking place. So it's just one of those things where the emotional impact, the amazing acting, the dialogue, all of those things combined to make me just as entertained, probably the 100th time or more of watching this movie as I am on most movies that I watch the first time in a modern movie. And I think that to me is like the power of when we want to talk about a greatest movie ever made. There's not many movies that I can say I will be just as entertained the next time I watch it as I was the first time I watch it. And I'm just as entertained, if not more entertained, and find value in the movie more than I do most modern movies made. It's a powerful movie, and it's interesting, and it's a great story, and it's a great character development. It hits everything that you're looking for. If you're looking for artistic and great and actually an entertaining movie, it's got all those pieces.
Yeah. There's nothing it misses out on, except for, as Matthew would say, sports and action. It hit 1 and 3. But I mean, at the same time, it's like you were saying, it's the little things that are happening in the background at the same time that you have these big kind of moments or scenes that are happening. It's the little, like the gambling thing where we talk about Renault, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're shutting you down. Oh yes, thank you for my winnings," type of a thing. Yeah. Or when they're cheating in the casino, and one of the guys asks Carl, he's like, "Is this place honest?" Yeah. As honest as they is long. After they cheat to let someone win.
Yeah.
And so it's it's just kind of back and forth, and it makes you feel like this is actually a workplace almost, right? Rick's Cafe, the back and forth between employees and boss, the back and forth between boss and customers, and everything like that. It makes it feel, it's very immersive, with a really nowhere close to what the budget is now. Like, I'll tell you, you're talking about, it's amazing that the camera's working at the end where they're on the tarmac. That airplane is cardboard.
Yeah.
And the people who are walking in front of it are little people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a forced perspective thing because they didn't have a budget to get a plane.
Sure.
No CGI, no nothing like that. And so the fact that it comes together, first of all, is a miracle.
Yeah.
Second of all, that it comes together and it's so good is just insane. Especially if you take a look at like Michael Curtiz, for instance. Like, a lot of his movies are great. He's a terrible person. Or fair. He was a terrible person.
Sure.
But he could make a great movie, and he's made phenomenal ones. And this one is without a doubt his best. And if you're putting it up against, like, it's hard to say what could be a better movie. I know Javier, he'd say Jurassic Park. And I mean, it's like night and day, or apples and oranges is what you're comparing. But at the end of the day, this movie's been around for 80 years. And it still holds up enough to be in the conversation, at least, for greatest movie of all time. I'll say I think it's the greatest movie of all time. Not my favorite movie of all time. Yeah. But I think it's the greatest one that's ever made. And I mean, it's to be in the conversation after 80 years is nuts.
Sure.
But to be this good, and it's up there. It definitely has to be in the top 3. But I would say it's the greatest movie that Hollywood has ever made.
Yeah, I mean, I have no argument against that argument. I think that's one of the things that, like, I want to, because as much as I would never want to admit it, like, I have a little bit of Mattson in me where I'm like, old school's tough. I don't love black and white. I don't love, like, you know what I mean? Because it just feels old. It feels dated, and I enjoy modern technology. However, from a movie perspective, I can't argue against the conversation of it being one of the greatest, if not the greatest movie ever made, because it's that good, and it's that tight, like, it's that solid, it's that put together that you can't, if you have a true argument against it being up there, and I'm not saying it being the greatest, but because I think we can always argue against it being the greatest to a level, absolutely. Right? But if you can argue that it shouldn't be part of the conversation of greatest movies ever made, then I just don't think you have a full grasp of film and movie making and the art that is, and what makes a film great, which is fine. I'm not judging you for that, but I'm just saying from a perspective of making great films that this one has to be part of the conversation.
Or you're hung up on something ridiculous like the love triangle.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, but here's the thing for me, like, that makes this movie dynamic.
It
Like,
makes it real.
yeah, because I can't help but like put myself in the position of those two men and go, what the fuck would I do? Because they're both very gracious to a certain degree. Like, I don't know that there is a person, I can't say that because I think there are a lot of people that are in interesting relationship circumstances these days. We have a very interesting modern relationship. In the 1940s, it's very different to see two men that have shared a relationship with the same woman not want to beat the shit out of each other. And to be honest, to be very gracious and supportive and understanding to each other. And I realize the circumstances were weird on both sides of that. But like when we first meet fucking, you know, well,
Victor,
when we first meet Rick, like he's a bitter son of a bitch, right? Like, and he's angry, and we don't understand why until we find out that he was left hanging pretty hard with this woman that he loved. And then you immediately relate with Rick, and you immediately have this, like, I don't want to say issue, because it's not that you don't like Ilsa, but there's a problem, right? Because you're like, ooh, this bitch, like, left this dude, like all he did was love on her, like he risked, like he was ready to go to the concentration camps, you know, and get arrested in order to be with her. And then she said she was going to leave, and then she just
dumped
totally
him at the
ditched
train
his ass.
station.
Yeah, with a fucking note. And,
Yeah.
and you're just like, ooh, motherfucker. But then you find out the story later about this whole thing with Victor, and you're like, fuck, like it's her husband. She loved him, like he was her hero.
Yeah, she thought he was
dead. Like, I get, like, and so it's this weird. So I don't get mad at the love triangle. Like, I think the love triangle is the best storytelling in this movie.
Thank you, JJ.
Because it's like, and the reason is because I can't pick. There's no right or wrong to this, right? Like, even if Rick had let her stay, and she stays, and Victor goes, like, I can't be mad at that choice, right? The fact that he pushes her and says, no, you need to go with Victor because you're going to regret it, makes me like Rick even more. And I think it's the right decision. That's my opinion. I think there's a lot of right decision, quote unquote, right decisions in this situation. But to me, like, I would like to think that I would have done the same thing that Rick does in his situation, because I do agree that eventually that's going to come back and bite him in the ass, but I think she's going to have some level of regrets no matter what, because it's a terrible situation. And that's the other thing that I love about it is while there's a quote unquote happy ending, there's not a happy ending in this for these three individuals. There's always going to be something hanging over all three of them involving this relationship. And the fact that you have this movie that has a story and a couple of characters, a trio of characters, could say a quadruple set of characters that overshadows the backdrop of World War II and the French Moroccan, or the French invasion and you know, takeover, and the spread of that to possibly include French Morocco. Like, how is it that this love story overshadows this major story of war? To me, that's just impeccable, unbelievable writing, and then directing and acting. And so that story, if it weren't for that story, this movie sucks, right? Because those decisions and those keep you on the edge of your toes. What's he going to do? Because you don't know if he's going to give him the papers. In fact,
and that's what makes it so good.
Yeah, it's so
you have
good.
No clue, because he's going back and forth, and it feels like he makes his choice when you know, at the airport.
Yeah,
like that's when he makes his choice.
Yep.
At the very last minute, and you're thinking, oh, up to this point, oh, he's going to stab in the back. He's stabbing in the back, and then it's, you know, almost like flipping a coin. Nope, turn left. Here we go. We're gonna adjust.
Yeah,
and it's like the greatest. It's one of the greatest things watching this for the first time. It's something that I wish I could get over and over again, is because I've seen this movie 250 plus times. Yeah. Like, I watch this movie a lot. And you know, it's knowing what's going to happen kind of lessens it a little bit.
Sure.
But it still is just so good because of the writing, the dialogue, the acting, everything you said. Like, there's still a little teeny tiny part of me. It's like, oh, maybe this time it's gonna be different.
Yeah. And I kind of want it to be, right? Like, yes. I want Rick and Ilsa to be together because I like Victor, but I fucking
but you're
love
not.
Rick.
Yeah,
You know
you're
what I mean?
emotionally attached to Rick.
Yeah, and
Because
Humphrey
you don't
Bogart
get you don't
gives you
get
that.
Victor's story. And
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And Humphrey Bogart just fucking destroys it. Like, he just makes you want him to be. And no, you know, nothing against Paul Heinrich, but like you say, you don't get that level of depth to his story and who he is as a person. And you want Rick to succeed. You want him to get the girl. And then he gives up the girl because it's the right thing to do. Nobody fucking does that shit.
No.
So it was just, I just love it. Like,
But
yeah,
it's great because it gives you hints throughout the movie, right? Rick ran guns to Ethiopia. He did all these things where he was fighting on the underdog side. He does the right thing, but he puts on this outer shell of this tough guy who's in it for himself type of a thing. But when the chips are down, he does the right thing.
Yeah.
And so they let you know what's going to happen. But at the same time, you're like, oh no, he's totally taking those letters. He's going off with a pretty girl. 100% taking the letters.
Yep.
And so it just goes back to being such a great written movie and then a phenomenal acting job.
Yeah.
By everybody, but mainly your core cast of characters. Oh, it was brilliant.
Yep. And Ingrid Bergen that's a beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she is so good. Like, how she's just so fucking calm the whole movie. Like, I love her. Like I said, the four of them, the four main characters, I love them. I think it just really shows the level of acting that they had and the storytelling and the writing. It was just so different than what you see today, fortunately and unfortunately. But another scene that you brought up with our topics is the La Marseille scene.
La Marseillaise.
La Marseillaise. Yeah, sorry, I'm not good on my French, but yeah, great scene.
So
love it.
I think this is the greatest show of patriotism in any movie. And it's got a kind of funny backstory. So the song that the National Socialists are singing is actually not the song that they originally picked, but if they picked the one song, they would have had to pay royalties to said National Socialist Party. So they ixnayed that. And so that it was originally, I think, supposed to be like the German national anthem or something along those lines. They switched it to a different patriotic song, essentially the German equivalent of My Country 'Tis Thee.
Sure.
But so everybody in the cafe at this time were all refugees from World War II. So there's number one. A lot of them were French, but everybody was refugee. And then you have this really powerful moment of, Victor Laszlo, who's the incorruptible good guy, coming down and, telling the band essentially, hey, why are you just sitting here? Play the French national anthem. And then you get everybody singing. It's a really powerful moment, but it's also the little things, right? So like you were saying earlier, with the look, you see Renault's true colors because he looks at Rick during this while they're saying it. It just turns like, what are you going to do? Type of thing. I know you're kind of good. You won't admit it. Anytime I ask you a direct question, you ask me a direct question that I don't want to answer. So I'm going to look at you, see what you do. And I think that there's two big like patriotic scenes, both dealing with the World War II. One of them is in this movie. The other one's Sound of Music. But it's this movie, this song, playing the French national anthem, and you see everybody crying. It's because they're refugees from France, or World War II refugees, and so it's a huge moment for them. Show of patriotism that I think is lost in a lot of movies today that try and show the value. It's lost on what it is. It's not an us and them kind of thing. It's this is my country, my nation. This is what I believe in. I'm gonna stand up and say something about it. And it's kind of cool how it plays off too, because you have the National Socialists are trying so hard, the five of them, to out-sing the entire cafe, and then they give up, right? And so it's a very symbolic kind of cool moment that I absolutely love, and I could watch this scene on repeat all the time and not be upset with myself.
Yeah, for sure. Weren't the National Socialist soldiers all played by German Jews? That's okay. That's what I thought I remember reading.
Yeah, or at least the vast majority of them were.
Yeah. A lot of them, and they had escaped National Socialist Germany in order to be, and then they were, which I think is really cool that they did that, allowed them to do that. Yeah, like you say, it's a very emotional scene that I think a lot of people overlook too, and in the situation of people watching it now, like people who've never seen it before and weren't living it. I think in the time, and I think at the time, like if you were watching it in 1943, obviously there was a level of understanding there that was very different than there is today. Now most people don't even understand. I mean, shit, we have people that argue whether or not the worst part of that war actually happened or whether it was manufactured, and I'm like, you fucking ignorant. That bothers me. But so I don't think the impact, but I'm glad that we talk about it, because that is a huge thing for the fact that these people that have lived through these National Socialist issues and the cruelties that were heaped upon people for years during this war were allowed to have this patriotic moment, like you say, and really overshadow and show that, hey, there's good happening and we're winning to a degree, even though there are a lot of people that are losing, which is very, very unfortunate. Crazy stuff. One of the funnier things before we move on to the next topic, but I also didn't know this, but like there's like movies that were made about Casablanca. Like, have you ever seen Play It Again, Sam?
Yeah.
By Woody Allen. Weird movie, but they get the line wrong, like, because he never says "play it again," Sam. And so I found, and then there's another movie as well, A Night in Casablanca, from '46, which is a Marx Brothers spoof on Casablanca, and they get the line wrong, which I always thought that was really funny.
It's funny because it's one of the most most incorrectly quoted movies of all time, while at the same time being one of the most quoted movies.
Well, and it's weird because, like, and I think what gets me is, I mean, a lot of people misquote a movie. Like, one of my favorites is, like, when we've talked about Tombstone and I'm your Huckleberry. Like, a lot of people are saying, I'll be your Huckleberry. No, he doesn't. I'm your Huckleberry. But that's it's very misquoted. But I get why that misquote is easy, right? It's not like but this is not a short line that they're turning into Play It Again, Sam. This is you played it for her, you can play it for me. If she can stand it, I can play it. How the fuck do you get Play It Again, Sam, out of that? Like, I don't understand how that line is misconstrued so often. Anyway, neither here nor there. I was just thinking about that as I was watching it yesterday. Because every time I watch it, I'm like, fuck, that's a long line. Where's the Play It Again, Sam? Because I always wait for it. I'm like, oh, that's right. It's not actually in the movie. So, anyway, weird thought.
I like it.
Yeah. But this leads to, talking about that, especially that very patriotic moment, leads to the very strange circumstance in Morocco at the time. And in not just Morocco, but any French or, occupied state, their, colonies and the places that they technically weren't
supposed to be, but they conquered and they took over and colonized and
sure
used for vacations.
And just because France is occupied doesn't mean that Germany then has control over their colonies. That's not how it worked. And we see that a lot of people don't understand that that's what's going on in Morocco. There is a presence, right? Because of the occupation. And there's an understanding that it wouldn't take much for Morocco in this time, or any of these colonies to be occupied. But in this moment, you have French officials and police officers and soldiers that are now technically supposed to take orders from National Socialists,
which is the puppet of the Third Reich.
Yeah. So it makes for a very interesting, like you say, there's people that are trying to use French Morocco as a launching point to get out of occupied territories and into the United States and these safer countries. But we see how difficult it is because they still have to maneuver the officials. And so, there's a lot of corruption there and a lot of I'm sure there's a lot of people, and we've seen movies. In fact, we did Inside Man, where this guy makes a lot of money, and it was due by doing things like this. So it's interesting.
Oh, I love it because I think Claude Rains as Renault does a great job of flirting with, harmless corruption and, getting mine, right? That kind of mentality. And he does a good job of it.
Yeah.
Like my favorite thing, or one of my favorite lines in this movie is, so the kind of the whole story is these letters of transit, Signor Ugatti, who's Peter Lorre's character, steals them, kills people, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
They catch Ugatti. And so Victor Laszlo goes to the office, and Renault's sitting there filling out the paperwork, and he's like, we're trying to make out how Ugatti died. You can't decide if he committed suicide or died while trying to escape.
Yeah.
And it's funny to me because it's corruption, right?
Yeah.
How am I going to make myself look good at this? But it's also in a way the same thing. Right? If you died while trying to escape, they're going to shoot you. That's committing suicide in a way. They're not going to rearrest you. And so it's like, which one looks better to me? But it's said so nonchalantly that it shows just like, Renault does not give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. He's just there for himself, and he even tells you a little bit, I have no convictions, right? I blow with the wind. And where the rules are coming from now happen to be from Vichy, France.
Yeah.
And this kind of becomes an issue between him and Major Strasser, Third Reich official, because Renault he's in a point where he does not care.
Yeah.
Like he's out for himself. And we see that and the one kind of problem I have with the movie almost is Renault's lady friends. So this kind of, sleep with me almost mentality, and I'll get you your exit visa.
Sure.
That's the one part that's never really sat right with me.
Yeah.
However, it's probably the most accurate part of this movie.
Oh, for sure. That shit was happening.
Exactly. So it's the one thing, because it's more of a, I like Claude Rains so much that this almost feels like it's putting a stain on him. But everything else is just so great, where he's this slightly corrupt official.
Mm-hmm.
And he's open about it. He is open about the fact that he's a corrupt official, that he, is taking orders from Vichy because that's what's happening. And when challenged about it by, the Germans, he's like, well, are you admitting that you're going to lose the war and lose your power, and that Free France is going to get control again? Like, that doesn't sound like something you guys normally admit.
Yeah.
Which anywhere else is an immediate shot while trying to escape scenario or committing suicide, and someone else is filling out his paperwork.
Yep.
But here, like you were talking about, here in the French Morocco, in their colony, he even said something similar. Like, he's the master of his own fate.
Yeah.
Like, he kind of jumps when the Germans are around, but also not really.
Yeah.
What are they really going to do to him?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, but he flirts with it so well and plays a corrupt official so well that it's part of the reason why I love his performance.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, and I love, like, it's blatant, like, too. Like, nobody questions. Like, Renault will take your ass, to keep himself afloat. I mean, to the point of two things. One, he makes a wager on whether Victor's going to get out or not. Like, with Rick, and they're both like, we don't fucking really care. It just is what it is. And then the second piece of it is, like, I love the part where at the end, when Rick sells Ricks to Ferrari, and he's like, don't worry, I talked to Ferrari. He's still going to make sure you win. Like,
he'll let you win a roulette.
Yeah, I'm just like, it's so funny. Because it's just out in the open. Like, and people are walking around him while it's not like they're like, don't worry, he'll let you win. Like, it's like, fuck, you still got your roulette winnings. Like, everybody knows.
And to add to that, like at the final scene in the airport, spoiler alert, but once again, if you haven't seen this movie, I don't want you on this podcast. When Rick shoots Major Strasser, and then the French, cops for like French police show up, and Renault's like, look at the dead body. Major Strasser's been shot. Round up the usual suspects. And it's him and Rick. Nobody else is there.
Yeah.
One of the two of them shot Major Strasser. And his police force is like, okay.
Yep.
They hop
just
back in the car and they go
grab him and go. Yeah, it's so funny. I love it.
It's such a great way to end it, but yeah, it's completely out in the open that yes, I'm corrupt. I'm the police official. You play by my rules, I'll get you what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love too, like the fact that like the banter between him and Rick too, like where he's just like, you are a sentimentalist. Like he says it like 8 times. Like it's this judgment, but at the same time, there's a little bit of Renault that's a little bit the same.
Mm-hmm.
So that and it's almost like he's living vicariously through Rick's like sentimentalist actions. Like when he helps the young couple to win at roulette so that they can get out and buy their, way out. And he's like, pay
You're
Renault
a race
to buy.
sentimentalist.
Yeah. But it's great because you can see that like Renault's like respects it too. Like he's like, I like it. I wish I could do a little more like that myself. And then kind of leans it. That's how we end up with it was the usual suspects because he didn't get paid for that. He's just like,
But it's funny because at the same time with that like gambling thing, he's like, hey, I'm gonna be in tomorrow with a breathtaking blonde. It'll make me very happy if she loses. Don't do it again, Rick.
Yeah.
Like you ruined my tryst, but I'm in tomorrow with somebody else. Don't do it. Stop it.
Make me very happy if she loses. It's fucking great. He's such a dick.
It's Claude Rains and it's Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah.
That are doing it. And it's just so great. So I just love the fact that they lean into like corrupt officials.
Yeah.
That they exist 100%. The bureaucracy that goes around with everything, the red tape, but they're still able to put a funny spin on it while staying true to this is what, people probably had to deal with. I wasn't around then, but they probably had to jump through all kinds of hoops and red tape and, sell off, priceless family heirlooms for very little in order to get, a chance at getting out of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It's nuts. And so I think this movie does a good job of balancing act between everything that it has.
Yeah, I agree. It's got a lot going on, and yet it's a very simplistic movie at the same time. It's very interesting. All right, sir, you ready to rate it?
Let's do it.
All right. I'm gonna make you go first.
Oh, this is so
easy for you, and it's not as easy for me. So
yeah. I kind of get that. On 100%. It's an easy 5. I believe this to be the greatest movie ever made. I will watch it again. I will probably put it on right now because I got about 2 hours before Oshi gets home. Might as well. It's about the runtime.
Yeah.
100%. I think this is a perfect movie. We kind of talked about it. There's stuff that I'm like a little nitpicky about, but that's just because I've watched it 250 times. And after you've watched it about 7, you already know what's going to happen. And now you get to start poking holes in it just for fun. But 100%, I think this is a perfect movie. Go watch it if you haven't watched it. If you have watched it, go watch it again. Because it is that good. And it's a good reminder about kind of where we came from. So we don't go back that way, hint, hint, wink, wink to some people. So yeah, 5, easy. If I could give it higher, I would.
Yeah. I mean, there was never any doubt what you.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and the reason I struggle with this is because there are aspects of the movie that I struggle with, but those are aspects that aren't the movie's fault, right? It's the time in which it was made. But it's kind of a double-edged sword because I want to criticize it for some of those things, but how do I do that when it's still better than most of the modern movies made with
we'll still be friends, JJ, if you're going to criticize it. Don't worry about that.
But that's the other piece is like I sit and I go, is there really anything for me to criticize that is actually critical, right? Like it's not. I think that's the part that makes me sit and go, it's hard for me to criticize it because what I want to criticize it for is like the little things that in technology that are bothersome because it's a 1943 film. That's not that film's fault. The fact that a 1943 film can keep me that entertained and enthralled is still outweighs that. So I sit and I go, is it a 5? I'm like, I don't know if I can give it a 5, but at the same time, I don't have an argument as to why. That doesn't make me sound like an asshole. So I'm like, it's really hard for me to say that, right? And in a movie podcast where we review movies, how do I destroy my credibility in my opinion in that way by saying, I don't like it because it's black and white, and there's some really weird
I
editing
know who
shit,
you
right?
sound like.
I know. And I think it's not even because it's black and white, because I don't mind black and white film, but I like this one was on the cusp of, I think they could have done the remake in color and it would have been okay, but they refused to do it, which I also respect. Anyway, this is a weird fucking conversation for me to be in, but it's like what's going through my head for the whole fucking day is, like, how am I going to rate this movie? But I mean, for the sake of the fact that there's nothing critical for me about the content of the movie and about the acting and about the storytelling, I have to give it a 5 because
we can still be friends.
Yeah, I know. That's right. We the podcast is still alive. At the very worst, I would have given it a 4.5. But I don't have a valid argument as to not to give it a 5, because even watching it last night, I was like, God, this movie is so fucking good. It just is that good. There is nothing that I can say I don't enjoy about this film. I mean, with you, I can nitpick little things, but is that really what makes? I mean, I nitpick other films all the time, and I still give them higher scores than you think I'm going to, because I'm pretty vocal about my nitpicking. But this one, I have a hard time finding things to nitpick about. It's just that good. It's that entertaining. It's that well written. It's that well directed. It's that well acted. It's just that good. It should be and is in my conversation for greatest films ever made. If it's not in the top 5, it's a shame. I think we could argue all day long about that. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to give it a 5. I also think it's if not on the verge, if it's not just completely a perfect movie, it's fucking damn near as perfect as it gets. And so I've given 5s to films that are way less good. So I have to give it a 5 and go with that. So great movie. Good choice. Happy to have watched it again. I will watch it again because it's just that good. So, all right, Alec, when we aren't shitting on National Socialists, tell everybody else where they can find us.
I love that that's got on. Thank you for joining us on an adventure through history, watching one of my favorite all-time movies and what I believe to be the greatest movie ever made, Casablanca. We have been on an oldies kick in June, and it has been fun. If you think there is a classic movie we glossed over, request it in a comment or join us on Patreon and force us to watch it. Our current patron and sponsor, MLB, that is Mattson Likes Brownies, not Major League Baseball. Got to put in that disclaimer. Right. Is amazing for choosing these classics. We appreciate you. Here's to looking at you, kid. Missed some recent episodes, guys? Well, you can find them all wherever fine podcasts are found, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Ghana. Leave us a review and let us know what you think of our verdicts. With that, I will kick it back to the king of Crash, Jack Dunn's baby, a JJ.
That's right. Much appreciated, Alec. What a fun time. June's been fun. I think we got one more in June.
It's another first.
We'll talk about it when we get there. So looking forward to it. Should be interesting. With that, as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Cinemagic out.
Whoa!